A violet sun hung above the blue curve of Earth, its light gleaming off the obsidian hull of the Vraxilian Ascendant, a command dreadnought in the Dominion's 4th Colonial Fleet. From the observation deck, High Commander Telvier stared down at the planet with mild amusement, arms clasped behind his back. Earth spun slowly beneath them, brimming with life yet utterly still. No energy signatures worth noting, no orbital defenses, no sign of spacefaring capability. A backwater, practically a museum. "This world is unworthy of our steel," he muttered. Beside him, strategist Karn nodded while reviewing data on a shimmering display node. Their atmospheric density is optimal for infantry deployment. Primitive communication systems. Inconsistent global military response. A perfect candidate for a live training simulation. Telvier's mandibles clicked in dry humor. A shepherd world. They'll scatter like herd beasts the moment our drop ships breach their clouds. He turned to face the bridge, where rows of Dominion officers chattered and relayed orders in calm, practiced tones. Everything about this invasion was calculated, coordinated, as if it were a parade rehearsal. The humans wouldn't even know they were part of the drill until it was over. In the lower decks, dozens of young alien recruits waited in drop pods, scales polished, adrenaline regulated, weapons pristine. For most, it was their first deployment, but they greeted it with laughter, even bets. The humans were expected to fall within minutes of contact. One recruit, Cadet Yelf, elbowed his squad mate. "You think they'll cry? I heard their species wails when afraid." "They've never fought above sticks and combustion powder," the other replied. "This'll be over before my first kill record pings in." The command to deploy echoed down from the overhead speakers in a cold monotone. Mission cycle, live. Zone designation, Earth. Objective, pacify. 32 Dominion assault shuttles ripped through the stratosphere, scattering through global quadrants: New York, Rio, Moscow, Cairo, Nairobi. The approach was unopposed. Human satellites either ignored them or failed to detect their presence. As expected, within minutes, the first landers made contact, crushing pavement and glass under their anti-grav plates. Drones buzzed out, scanning sectors. Holograms showed city streets eerily empty, vehicles abandoned mid-commute. There were no barricades, no sirens, no countermeasures. Humanity had fled before even glimpsing their attackers. In the Nairobi quadrant, Lieutenant Vrul's squad entered the old financial district. Skyscrapers loomed like relics of a naive civilization. No heat signatures above threshold, their sensor technician reported. Power grids collapsing in this sector. Move 3 blocks northeast. Set up a relay post. Vrul gave the order and turned on his comlink. "High Commander, Nairobi vector is clear. No resistance. Local systems suggest full evacuation. Minimal response effort." Telvier's voice crackled through the channel. "Efficient cowards. Proceed. Extract their archives. We'll study their behavioral weaknesses later." Yet something gnawed at Vrul. The silence wasn't the terrified retreat of a broken species. It was too clean, too intentional. He opened his mouth to voice it, but the channel cut out with a hiss. In the Colorado sector, deep in the Rockies, another drop unit, Squad Zek-1, had deployed hours earlier and was overdue for check-in. At first, command assumed a terrain disruption. But then fragments of emergency telemetry spiked through the fleet's communication net. Telvier brought it up immediately. A single video file remained partially intact, shaky cam footage from a squad member's visor feed.
Snow, trees, night.
Then shadows moving fast, figures indistinct but humanoid. Not civilians. Not even militia. The recording ended with a scream. One word barely audible before signal collapse. "They're trained." He replayed it twice, jaw tightening. Analysis. Karn stepped closer, tapping rapidly through data. No registered human military uniforms. No formal weapon IDs. But the strike was tactically synchronized: motion jammer, blind zone tech, projectile weaponry. Very analog. Analog, Telvier repeated slowly, but effective. Over the next few hours, 4 more Dominion squads went dark. Cairo, Brasilia, Denver, Lagos. Their final transmissions, if any, were a mix of garbled breathing, static, and reports of kinetic ambushes. The attackers showed a brutal efficiency, crippling power nodes, disorienting squads, and vanishing. Worse still, human digital networks began blaring strange messages in hacked frequencies aimed directly at Dominion equipment. Not a drill. Leave Earth or be buried in it. Welcome to the real war. On board the Ascendant, strategist Karn grew visibly tense. These aren't isolated uprisings. This is coordinated. Someone trained them. Telvir's eyes narrowed. They train for us. Moments later, a trooper's cracked helmet was recovered from the Nairobi zone. It had been left deliberately, atop a Dominion outpost's scorched banner. Carved into the dome of the helmet were 3 words in shaky but unmistakable Terran English. Drop troopers live. The bridge fell into silence. All across the Dominion fleet, the illusion shattered. Earth wasn't a pasture. It wasn't asleep. It had teeth hidden deep and sharpened for years. Telvir closed the file, turned back toward the planet, and said nothing. But deep inside, for the first time in his long military career, he felt something strange. The raw pulse of a fight not yet won. Not a rehearsal. Not a drill. A war. A real one. And it had already begun. 100 meters beneath the Nevada desert, silence ruled the command chamber, thick, metallic, absolute. The walls were etched with layers of shielding older than most of the men and women inside. Project Olympus had no official designation. It existed between federal budgets and beneath 27 classified false names. It was simply where the drop troopers were born. General Amina Rao paced along the polished floor, her boots tapping a rhythm older than memory. Her voice was low but precise. Confirm vector shift on alien fleet. Nairobi's sector shows retraction. Confirmed, replied Lieutenant Mehta, her fingers dancing across a holodeck glowing with orbital data. Dominion shuttles have pulled back to low orbit in 5 major zones. Nairobi, Cairo, and Denver are dark. No new landings detected. They're starting to doubt, Rao said, and for a second, the grimness in her tone lifted. Good. Now, let's make them fear. She turned to the squad waiting near the lift doors. 6 silhouettes in matte black armor stood motionless, their helmets cradled in their arms. No insignias, no ranks. Only scars, burns, and 1,000-yard stares. Soldiers rebuilt into something else. Ghosts trained for planetary deathlines. They were the answer to a threat humanity had never been allowed to speak of. You all know why you're here, Rao continued. You trained your whole lives for a war the world wasn't supposed to need. Well, that lie's dead now. The Dominion came early, and the brass wasn't ready. But you are. No one replied. They didn't need to. Captain Arden Cade stepped forward, his frame towering, every movement calculated, precise. His left arm was synthetic, polyfiber muscle latticed with titanium veins, and the exposed skin around it bore burn marks from training accidents too classified to record. We need to draw them into conflict zones we control, Cade said, voice gravel through steel. Force them out of orbit. Break morale. They're fast, but they're centralized. Command collapses if we isolate nodes. Rao nodded. Exactly. First target is Sierra Grid 7. Former Dominion Relay Hub. You'll hit it from 3 directions, all synchronized. No mercy, no broadcasts, no prisoners. From the corner, another voice chimed in, softer, clipped, but laced with fire. They're not expecting a full-spectrum response. It was Sergeant Lena Hawk Sarin, squad sniper and former intelligence operative. Her eyes were colder than the Mojave at midnight, and her hands trembled only when she wasn't holding a rifle. They still think we're scattered militias. They haven't seen what we really are. Then let's show them, Cade said. The troopers moved toward the lift. Each step was deliberate, like descending into myth. Somewhere far above, Earth rotated quietly. Its people, clueless to what hunted above and what fought below, continued fleeing, praying, or pretending this was just another anomaly in a century of them. In the orbiting Dominion cruiser, High Commander Telvier brooded in a darkened chamber. His expression was carved from stone. Officers brought reports, confusing, contradictory, unnerving. One mentioned entire squads being dragged into shadows by unseen combatants. Another suggested human infrastructure was adapting, shifting, using subterranean systems to mask their movements. "How many strikes now?" Telvier asked, voice tight. 7 confirmed, 5 more unverified. "None with survivors," Karn replied. Telvier turned, rage carefully caged behind his polished uniform. "We underestimated the Terrans. We thought this planet soft, its people weak. But they have warriors. Hidden ones. Purpose-built." Karn hesitated. "These drop troopers. We assumed they were rogue elements. But it appears coordinated deployment patterns, tactical cohesion. They're not improvising. They're executing doctrine." Telvier's jaw flexed. "Then find their doctrine. Map it. Break it." Meanwhile, in the shattered ruins of former Sector Grid 7, the drop troopers moved like smoke through concrete. Cade led from the front, his HUD feeding real-time enemy telemetry into his left optic. The Dominion outpost above them was clean, too clean, like a trap set to impress, not to kill. He raised a hand. Saren froze behind him. 2 others, Marks and Rios, moved into flanking positions. "Confirm 3 heat signatures. Short-range plasma rifles. Low armor," Saren whispered. "Too easy," Cade murmured. "Saren, thread the one on the left." Rios, distraction pulse east corridor. "On my count. 1 breath.
2. Now."
The operation unfolded in 12 seconds. 1 enemy collapsed with a silent bolt through the eye. The second turned just in time to catch a blast to the chest. The third ran. Cade brought him down with a wrist-mounted spike. As silence returned, Rios crouched near a Dominion terminal and jacked in. Hollow data flared in harsh red. "Commander," she said, tone uncertain, "they've begun adapting. They're routing fleet AI through surface nodes, trying to predict our next strike." "Let them guess," Cade said. "We're not a program. We're the end of one." The squad exfiltrated moments before orbital scans returned. They moved underground, into tunnels that had existed long before the first moon landing. Troopers didn't need daylight. They thrived in shadow. Later, in a sealed comms vault, General Rao watched a satellite feed loop endlessly. Dominion drones now circled above major cities, scanning for troopers who no longer needed cities. The aliens had come expecting prey. Instead, they had found the quiet fury of a planet that had already buried its dead. And as Cade sat in the dark of a transport en route to their next target, he replayed the enemy broadcast intercepted from the alien bridge, a phrase translated badly but clearly enough. Earth was meant to bleed easily. He smiled. "A dry, broken thing. Then let's show them what bleeding really feels like." The Dominion fleet began to flicker. Not from power failure, but from confusion. The seamless precision of its orbital coordination, once flawless, now cracked under the weight of countless anomalies. Strike commands returned void. Recon teams failed to report in. Ghost signals wormed through secure channels, flooding systems with Terran gibberish and static-laced threats. For the first time in centuries, a Dominion armada did not know what it was fighting. High Commander Telvier stood at the center of the Ascendant's war-core chamber, his claws trembling ever so slightly above the input console. Dozens of advisors circled him, flooding the air with charts and data fragments, none of them reassuring. Telemetry loss on Quadrant 7, 8, and 10. Enemy counterstrikes now forming predictive patterns. "They're baiting us, Commander." A red glare bathed his face. "They are not supposed to be capable of this." "Then your doctrine is obsolete," a voice said, not from the room, but from a captured communication feed now displaying across every terminal. The screen filled with the face of a drop trooper, helmetless, scarred, and unflinching.
"Cade."
His one remaining eye glowed faintly from interface saturation, but his gaze was human in the cruelest way. "You called Earth a training exercise," he said, tone surgical. "But you never asked what we were training for." Then the screen went black, and the drop began. From the far edges of Earth's exosphere, hidden platforms long embedded in derelict satellites activated. Hypersonic stealth pods burst into the atmosphere in synchronized waves. They didn't glide. They punched their way through, streaking across the sky like the wrath of a planet betrayed. Hundreds of drop troopers deployed simultaneously across the globe: Beijing, Berlin, Caracas, Johannesburg, and, most importantly, the Dominion's own forward cruiser yards in orbit. Inside the orbital carrier Vraxenpike, alarm screamed as a fire team of drop troopers breached the cargo bay with a pressurized rail drill. The hull shrieked. Atmosphere vented in seconds. Within moments, the alien crew was engaged at close quarters. They fired plasma bursts, but their opponents didn't flinch. The troopers moved like apex predators, armor absorbing and deflecting, blades and kinetic rifles dismantling the enemy like a dissection. Saren took a position near the coolant core, picking off Dominion engineers who attempted to overload it. "They're panicking," she reported coldly. "Let them." "Panic wastes oxygen," Cade answered through the shared comlink, stepping through a bulkhead filled with smoke and bodies. He moved without hesitation, trailing ash. Their target was above, the Ascendant, the nerve center. Take it, and the fleet fell. As the rest of the squad set demolition charges throughout the Vraxenpike, Cade launched toward the Ascendant in a jump pod barely larger than his body. Enemy fighters darted past, some catching the pod in glimpses before the automated counterjammers blinked them from radar. One fighter turned to intercept. It was too late. The pod slammed into the Ascendant's underhull, drilling fast, sealing behind him before the breach was noticed. Then silence, dark corridors, flickering lights, and the distant roar of confused orders. He emerged like a reaper from myth, plasma deflectors hissing against his chest plate. Two guards lunged. One crumpled to a spike, the other to a neck-snapping twist. A door opened. Telvier stood alone in the gravity-warped core chamber, flanked by pulsing neural columns that guided the fleet's navigation AI. He looked smaller than before, though no less dangerous. His ornate armor shimmered with active shielding. He did not speak. Cade lowered his rifle. They closed the distance without words, meeting like old ideas that had always hated each other. Blades unsheathed, alien and human, ceremonial and brutal. They struck and parried, carving sparks from one another, blood from skin and oil from armor. Telvier was faster. His movements had the edge of discipline built over centuries of conquest. But Cade was relentless, every feint followed by pain, every wound ignored, every movement born of Earth's countless wars. They tore through the chamber, denting steel, cracking conduits, disabling 3 AI pylons as their bodies collided again and again. Finally, Cade drove his blade under Telvier's left arm, twisting until the alien screamed. With a roar, he lifted the commander by the throat and slammed him against the final neural core. "You never studied us," Cade growled. Telvier coughed blood, defiant to the end. "We didn't need to." "You should've," Cade said, then drove the blade through his chest. Alarms erupted. With the Ascendant's neural link destroyed, Dominion ships across orbit spiraled into chaos. Fire rained from above, some ships crashing into oceans, others fleeing at fractured angles. Ground units lost all coordination. Back on Earth, in the bunker beneath Nevada, General Rao watched the collapse unfold across her screens. Dominion transmission trails became silence. Heat maps blinked off. She turned toward the central console. "All units, cease counter-ops. Begin recovery. Debrief protocols in 48 hours. Our skies are clear." Across continents, drop troopers emerged from bunkers, forests, rivers, and ruins. Some stood silently, armor scorched and limbs shaking. Others dropped to one knee, exhausted. Cade, aboard the dying shell of the Ascendant, limped into the command bay and activated the last remaining transmitter. His voice was low, but it carried weight. "To anyone still listening," he said, "Earth stands. This isn't over, but it's ours again." Then he sat against the wall, closed his eyes, and let the silence settle. Earned, at last.